The femme fatale in the woods. The air in the woods was thick, oppressive, as if the trees themselves were whispering secrets only the earth could hear. The forest surrounding the small town of Harrow's Bend was ancient, its roots twisted into the earth, holding stories of those who had entered but never returned, of whispers and shadows that were never quite explained. To the locals, the woods were a sanctuary, a place of serenity, but to others, it was something darker. Her name was Celine. She wasn't a woman who could easily be described with simple words. There was something about her, a pull, a magnetism, something that seemed to draw every man in. The first time she stepped into Harrow's Bend, no one quite knew where she came from. She appeared without warning, a silhouette in a long, dark coat, her heels clicking sharply against the cobblestone streets, catching the attention of every man who saw her. She wasn't like the others in this sleepy town. She didn't belong here, and everyone knew it. But they didn't mind. No, they welcomed her, in their own way. There was a subtle shift in the town's dynamic the moment she arrived. Men who had long ago resigned themselves to the monotony of country life began to whisper of her beauty, of the way she moved, graceful and confident, yet effortless, like the wind dancing through the trees. She was an enigma, a puzzle with no clear solution, and every man in Harrow's Bend was desperate to solve her. The first encounter. It was one of those crisp autumn mornings when Celine first met Charles Sinclair, the town's most powerful man. He was the owner of the largest estate in the county, a sprawling mansion that sat on the edge of the woods, looking down upon the village like a silent sentinel. Charles was a man who never showed weakness, his life defined by control and power. He was ruthless in business and a respected figure in the town. No one could deny that he was a man who held the reins of the community's destiny in his hands. When Celine crossed his path in the local market, he felt an inexplicable jolt, something he hadn't felt in years. She was there, standing by the butcher's stall, her back straight, her head held high. Her eyes, a piercing shade of green, locked with his for the briefest of moments, and in that instant, everything around them seemed to fade away. The world paused. "Good morning, Mr. Sinclair," she said, her voice soft and melodic, like a song that lingered in the air long after it had ended. "Good morning, miss." Charles faltered for a moment, caught off guard by her presence. He cleared his throat and adjusted his tie, a habit when he was nervous, which was rare. "Sinclair. Charles Sinclair." "Celine," she answered simply, her lips curving into a smile that made his heart race. There was no trace of the nervousness or uncertainty most women might have shown in his presence. She wasn't intimidated by him. She wasn't intimidated by anyone. And for the first time in a long time, Charles felt vulnerable. He looked at her, his eyes lingering longer than they should. There was something in the way she moved, in the way her lips parted when she spoke, that made him feel exposed. "Well, Celine," he said, his voice steady, though his pulse quickened, "I trust you're finding your stay in Harrow's Bend to your liking." "I'm just beginning to," she replied, her gaze dropping momentarily to the ground, only to return to his with a newfound intensity. "There's much to discover here." Charles smiled, but it was more out of politeness than anything else. "If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to ask." Celine's eyes softened as she considered his words. "I may take you up on that, Mr. Sinclair. Perhaps we could meet for a drink sometime." The suggestion hung in the air, seductive and dangerous. And Charles, damn him, couldn't bring himself to say no. He felt the weight of her invitation like a heavy cloak, settling over his shoulders, and he found himself agreeing before he could stop himself. The game begins. From that moment on, the game had begun. Celine's presence in Harrow's Bend was no accident. She had done her homework. She knew about the men who ruled this town, their weaknesses, their vices. She knew that beneath the polished exteriors of men like Charles Sinclair, there were cracks, deep, painful cracks that begged to be exposed. She watched them all. She knew how to get close, how to seduce their senses, how to make them feel like they were the only one in the world. It wasn't just physical, it was psychological. Her touch was deliberate, her words chosen carefully, each one designed to peel away at their defenses. She didn't need to sleep with them to have power over them. She knew how to make them desire her, to make them crave her, and that was all she needed. Charles was just the beginning. The first descent. The night they shared their first drink, the town seemed to hold its breath. They met at the town's small inn, a cozy place with low ceilings and a warm, inviting fire. Charles was late, but Celine was already there, seated in a corner booth, a glass of wine in her hand. When he entered, her gaze locked onto his immediately. There was no smile, no acknowledgement of the distance between them. She simply stared at him, her eyes intense, as if she were daring him to come closer. And he did. "What are you thinking, Charles?" she asked, her voice low, teasing. He hesitated. "I'm thinking that I've never met a woman quite like you." Celine smiled, the kind of smile that could melt a man's resolve. "Is that so?" she asked, leaning in just a little. "Tell me, what's so different about me?" He swallowed, feeling heat rise in his chest. You're not like the others." "Good," she whispered, the words sliding from her lips like silk. "Because I don't want to be." The web tightens. Over the next few weeks, Celine made her presence known in every corner of Harrow's Bend. She charmed the local businessmen, ingratiated herself with the women of the town, and all the while, she kept Charles Sinclair at arm's length, toying with him like a cat with a mouse. Her every move was deliberate, each encounter a carefully orchestrated performance. Charles began to lose focus. His business started to suffer. Small details were overlooked, contracts delayed, and deals lost. But it wasn't just business. He found himself thinking about Celine constantly. He dreamed of her voice, her touch, her smile. One night, after a particularly intense conversation, Charles found himself standing at her door. He had no plan, no script. He simply knew he had to see her again. When she opened the door, her expression was unreadable. She didn't need to say a word. The look in her eyes said everything. And that was when he realized that he had already lost. The final play. Celine's ultimate goal was clear. She wasn't just here for Charles Sinclair, she was here for his empire. She played her cards carefully, feeding him just enough to keep him on the edge, pushing him towards making decisions that would unravel everything he had worked for. She made him doubt his closest allies, his family, and ultimately, his own sense of self. And in the end, it wasn't the physical seduction that brought him down. It was the psychological torment. The constant yearning, the subtle manipulation, the whispers in his ear telling him he wasn't enough without her. When Charles finally realized what had happened, it was too late. Celine was already gone, leaving nothing but a trail of broken hearts and shattered dreams in her wake. The town was never the same again.